I first encountered today's guest, Priscilla Grim, without knowing it when I picked up my first issue at Zuccotti Park of the Occupy Wall Street Journal. I learned later, if I am to believe an assertion made by Dan Rather in his appearance on the Chris Matthews show in early October of 2011, she is, and I quote, the real moving force behind what's happening in the Wall Street protests. Moreover, Dan Rather described her as brilliant with the internet and going under the nom de plume of Grim. Well, later that month, Priscilla was also part of what the New Yorker called the big story, a Wall Street versus Main Street panel, and she appeared with several other alternative journalists along with Elliot Spitzer. And the traditional press since that time has covered her almost as much as she's covered Occupy itself. So this is Jerry Ashton with 15 Minutes of Fact on WGRNradio.com to let you know that I finally met her face-to-face at a meeting out on Long Island earlier this month, where she appeared on a panel attempting to explain to a 100-plus audience of older and affluent attendees why the Occupy movement was important to them and not just to the people who inhabited that tiny piece of property known as Liberty Square. It took some selling, but she was eloquent then, and I believe she will be eloquent in that purpose here. Welcome to the show, Priscilla.
Thank you, Jerry.
I'm happy to have you here for sure. It's customary for guests on 15 Minutes of Fact to tell us a bit about themselves and how they ended up being associated with Occupy Wall Street. So let's start with that and then tell us about your role in the Occupy Wall Street movement as well as the genesis of Occupy Wall Street Journal.
Well, that's just so much, isn't it?
Well, I figured in another half hour we should finish a 15-minute show.
Sounds perfect. Okay. Well, I mean, to start off, the Occupy movement is one of the most important social movements to have happened in the past 50 years, in which we've seen our country degenerate into a world in which the people who have always held the most resources in human society continue to do so and are only hoarding more as we move forward. It is probably the most important fight of our life, and I honestly believe that this is our last shot to really fix that imbalance, which is why I put so much energy towards this since the moment I heard about it. I first found out about it on a YouTube link on a friend's page showing the Manu Chao concert in New York during Labor Day in 2011, in which they had organizers from the New York City GA go and announce that there was going to be this occupation in Lower Manhattan, and it had been called for by Adbusters, and there was actually building an effort behind it. And I am an internet promotions person. My last big personal project that I worked on was called Real Punk Radio. We won an honorary Webby for excellence in the radio podcast division for 2011.
Well, do I detect that you were already alternative in some fashion?
You could say there's a few tattoos.
I believe that. Well, it's a shame we're not on television, but since we are on radio,
right.
When you did hear this, when you heard about this, and you, of course, had your own quiver full of arrows that you could use for this, what did you do? Did you call somebody up? Did you just show up at the park? How did it come about?
Well, I first looked at what was being put out online, and there was a website that was up that was separate from the Adbusters website called occupywallast.org, and they had the whole announcement of the action and when it was going to happen. And so basically, I just took that to indiemedia.org, is a website that's used by activists internationally, and I hit every American city with the announcement, posted it in the working indie media sites that were still in existence. This is a tool that was launched in the late 90s and is still used kind of by like really active activist communities.
Well, I'd like to make it apparent to the listener that what is often referred to as the leaderless movement of Occupy Wall
Right.
Street, which of course occupiers deny because they are leaderful. You're an
Yeah,
example of
they
that.
are. I mean, absolutely. I can't tell you, I have not been more inspired and humbled uh, by the genius and creativity that I'm surrounded by every day. It's just astonishing to me. The people who have come forward and put their best efforts forward as volunteers 24/7 for 6 months at this point, and living like one of the members of OccupyWallasT.org that I work with, she's living on a boat in a sewage canal in Brooklyn that
Well,
has no running water, okay? No running water.
yeah, a lot of our listeners, some of whom will be sympathetic to Occupy, some of whom are actual occupiers, and some are just trying to figure it out. They don't understand the sacrifices being made by people, whether it be giving up all their spare time or all of their time. I know myself of someone who basically is sleeping in his car in order
Right,
to be able to husband his resources enough to be able to participate in moving this forward.
right.
So, one of the complaints is, again, no leaders, and yet you're one of them, and you've met a few of
Wow.
them as well. So, who are the players?
I I am not a leader. I am just one person who is, among many working on the media efforts for Occupy Wall Street. I help message, I help put out information, I point people to resources. That's all that I do.
Well,
I am by no means a leader. I show up to working group meetings like anybody else, and maybe I have a few good ideas, maybe I don't, and I'm there to listen as much as I am there to bring things.
Well,
So,
that's been my experience of people that show up at what are called working groups, sometimes
right.
a general assembly. But since you are in media, I'd
Uh-huh.
appreciate your talking more broadly about how Occupy Wall Street Journal came about and the media efforts and the different pieces that you and others in the alternative media are putting together
Right.
to be the communication arm of Occupy.
Right. Well, so there's OccupyWallasT.org, which is right now the de facto website for communication for Occupy Wall Street. It was founded by a woman named Justine shortly after the Adbusters call went out. She started attending New York City GAs immediately. She was a founding member of the Internet Working Group. Um, and so this website really helped get out a lot of the information. She set up an 800 number on that site so that anybody could come and call a place so that they could get more information if they wanted to come to New York City. So I was one of the people who was on that phone tree for like 3 weeks until it was like just too overwhelming with the other stuff I was doing. I had to give it up. But it was actually really inspiring answering those calls the first couple of days of the occupation. Just hearing from people around the country who were calling in and were like, you guys cannot leave. You have to be there. I'm facing this kind of medical debt. I lost my house last year. My pension was cut in half by the crash. Like, people just full of anger and yet at the same time thankfulness that somebody was going out there to stick it on the line for them and for everybody who is crushed by this system that is not working for any of us right now. You know,
Well, it's that kind of passion, which, by the way, you're demonstrating right now, that has pulled people and drawn people to the essence and the morality of Occupy Wall Street. Now, you usurped, maybe that's not quite the word, but somewhere along the line, didn't the Wall Street Journal become a little bit offended that they all of a sudden had Occupy in front of their name?
I don't know. I don't really care. It's a great name for a paper.
It is a great name.
Until we get until we get 3 letters from an attorney, we're gonna keep it. So.
Well, good. I think that's called squatters' rights, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Now, I also understand that the Occupy Wall Street Journal has been replicated in different ways in other cities. As an example,
Absolutely.
there's the Boston Occupier, the Occupied Los Angeles Times, the Oakland
Right.
Tribune, Washington Times. Any others that I don't know about?
There's so many of them. I mean, but you got them. Like every single occupation now is popping up with its own paper, because the publishing of the paper is really helpful for actions when they happen. So you have a lot of onlookers who come around and who are hearing chants and seeing signs, but don't have like a more in-depth place that they can go to kind of really understand the ideas behind why people are marching in the streets, why people are so angry, and something that, and it, they're resonating with it to a bit, but they really need to be brought in further to the movement and see the ideas that are coming forth for another type of world. One of the chants is "We are unstoppable. Another world is possible." And maybe we don't exactly know what that is yet, but we know anything has to be better than what we're in right now.
That seems to be reverberating out there in the world at large, even given the people who, for whatever reason, find themselves as critics of the movement. But let me ask you another thing, and it's kind of sensationalistic here too. Anybody in the Occupy movement will become a lightning rod if they stick their head over the over the foxhole. And in one case, I think you didn't you actually get into a fuss with Miley Cyrus when she created a video called Liberty Walk, and apparently wasn't, and it was supposedly in the support of the movement, but it received mixed emotions in the Occupy world. Why is that? What was your role in that?
Basically what was happening at the time was that the Los Angeles occupation was facing being evicted, and when she came out with the song, it's like, that's great that you came out with this song where it's basically a remix of an old song, which I actually kind of like the song. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I wind up listening to a lot of pop music because my daughter's 9, and so, I like the Miley Cyrus occasionally, and this is a particularly good song. It speaks to like who she is, and she needs to find her place and whatever. And then she took a lot of the footage of people being arrested and the protests during the fall to it. It's really actually very cool. The thing is, though, that this occupation, Los Angeles, was facing eviction. And I and the other people at the Occupied Wall Street Journal thought that if she actually showed up to sing that song down at the occupation, it would buy them more time to stay there. And so the other thing is, TMZ has an audience of like millions,
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Millions of people who, chew on celebrity gossip like it's manna. And it's like, what the fuck is that? Oh God, I'm sorry. Anyway.
We'll leave that in because we don't edit things.
Okay. Just making sure. I mean, this is a basic part of culture that needs to be changed, right? And the way that you change that is that you introduce other, ideas in with the bullshit that they're, gobbling up. So, what it was, if you actually read the quote, it's, it's telling everybody in the TMZ audience, possibly millions, this is about economic civil rights, and, show up at LA City Hall tomorrow.
and did it come to pass?
They got evicted.
And Miley did not show up. Well, I do notice that Joan Baez showed up. There were a number of musical artists that showed up at the park.
Oh, yeah.
And that was exciting.
Yeah,
so,
it's been really inspiring to see these artists who are so well known for their political action to lend support to a nascent movement. It's been, just inspiring to see how quickly they, and the rest of the world really, have resonated with it. It's humbling.
Well, let me humble you even more by letting people know that you can be located and reached for people who want to be able to connect with you. So I know, of course, that you're located on Twitter. And what is your Twitter name there?
My Twitter handle is Grimwoman. It's woman spelled with a Y.
So it's Grim Woman.
Yes.
At Grim Woman, of course. And you're also on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And you're also, my goodness, your own background. You're founding editor and director of Occupied Media, and that's pound Occupied Wall Street Journal, and then there's occupiedmedia.us. Any other place where people can locate you, and do you have an email address?
Well, I'm also tweeting occasionally under the Occupied Wall Street Journal Twitter handle, so it's OccupyWSJ. And I do have an email address, but I would prefer not to. I mean, if you get me on Twitter,
if you'll share.
Yeah, and people can send me LinkedIn requests. So.
Well, I'll leave you with another interesting thought, because 15 minutes is not nearly enough to encompass the experiences that you've had and what you could be telling us about. But one of the things that I'd like to draw to your attention is that do you realize that you, or maybe not you, but the Occupy Wall Street Journal in its printed form is actually becoming a historical artifact?
Yes, I know.
And you are aware, of course, that there are museums around the country that are avidly collecting all kinds of occupied memorabilia in order to document this thing. It's almost as if back in 1776, people had followed around taking notes of everything that was said by all the people that were involved in the revolution at that time.
Well, as long as that means that the ideas are resonating with people and we'll see more people in the streets this spring, then I think it's terrific. But I really hope that what that translates to are feet in the street. I mean, we need people to show up. Tomorrow is a huge day of action. It's going to be February 29th, shut down the corporations. In New York City, it is planned to shut down Bank of America. We are going to have a pop-up occupation happening at New York Public Library tomorrow in Bryant Park. And May 1st, we are calling for a day without the 99%, in which nobody goes to work, in which everybody rejects the system in which we live under, and shows that there is strength in numbers, and shows that we are capable of a coordinated action to shift the power structure.
Well, with people like you at the helm, I have great fear for the power structure, no matter how much their 1% has sway at this present moment in history. So once again, Priscilla Grim, I want to thank you so much for appearing on our program, which is our own way of making an oral history of what's happening with Occupy Wall Street. That's 15 Minutes of Fact on WGRNradio.com. Again, Priscilla, thank you so much for appearing with us.
Thank you so much, Jerry.